Hi, everybody. This is Lama Justin. I'm in a little bit of a strange space right now in the sense that I can't see anybody. So I'm going to be giving this teaching uh, without being able to see you. So my suggestion is, as questions come up, um, to ask a question in the space, but towards the bottom of the screen where it says ask a question, and then also in the text box on the side, if there are any points that you feel like you might need clarity on, you can enter it in there. So this is a very kind of new and interesting way of teaching, not being able to see everybody. But it's a pleasure to be here with you all, and I can see that there are roughly 29 people who have logged on. Um, so, what the nature of this teaching is Mahamudra for the people, um, or and more specifically, a focus on Tilopa's six nails, which is a very profound and short um, meditation instruction developed offered by the Mahasiddha Tilopa, who lived anywhere between late 10th century, early 11th century, Bangladesh, West Bengal, that part of East India. Um, and so before I talk a little bit more about Tilopa, I'm going to ask if we can just take a moment to sit together. Um, so, what we're going to do is just focus on resting our mind right now. So, if you can, try and sit as comfortably as you can. And that could involve laying down if that's comfortable to you. Um, our bodies are all very different, and some can sit in lotus position, others can't, and it's not really so much about the position as much as it is about easing into a relaxed experience of the moment. So take a moment to sit comfortably. You want your back to be as straight as it can be without there being any pain. Um, if you can put your hands in the meditation mudra, or you can put them on your knees, or you can, if you're laying down, you can keep them on your sides. Take a moment to check in with your breath. Take a couple of inhalations and exhalations and let go of any stress or any busyness, any anxiety, any sense of nervousness, anything that's going on right now, good, bad, or middling. As you inhale stability, and as you exhale, just exhale whatever that is that may be in the way of directly seeing right now. We'll do that just a little bit. And again, just bring your awareness back to your breath and try and allow yourself to ease into this moment. Let your body relax. Try and let your mind relax. And just come into this moment, a moment that can never be recreated. a moment of direct experience. And then slowly bring to mind all of your sources of refuge, be the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha, or it could be a teacher who's been instrumental in your spiritual development. Could be a series of ancestors. Just take a moment to take refuge. In this moment, we're going to take refuge in awakening, in the Dharma of awakening, as well as the Sangha, which helps hold and support awakening. And just reflect on how amazing it is that we've all come together today on this Friday to practice Dharma, to listen to Dharma, to discuss Dharma. There's so much going on and not going on in the world right now, but we have come together in this way, which is really amazing. Um, so, I think what I'm going to do is, because these points are brief and they're meant to be brief. Mahamudra is one of these things that we can, and people have written very long books and analysis of the practice. The practice is also very simple, and the key to for lack of a better term, unlocking the practice is to embrace a mind and a practice of simplicity. So what I'm going to do is introduce each of Tilopa's 6 nails. There's 6 very brief meditation instructions. And we'll have a little bit of time to just, sit and practice, to become familiar with what these instructions point out. And then of course there'll be time for question and answer towards the end. And I want to be mindful of people's time and respectful of boundaries. And so I'm not going to go over our allotted time, just because it's easy for things to go on forever. But it's not fair if you've got something going on at 3:30. So I just want to be name that at the outset. A sip of coffee. So as I mentioned briefly in the beginning, before the meditation, Tilopa was a yogi who lived in 10th to 11th century Eastern India, the area known as West Bengal and or Bangladesh. The boundaries and borders in that part of Asia, you know, are were not what they are now. Um, and Tilopa, according to the stories, was this kind of, for lack of a better term, idiot savant who, or just a very realized being, or a combination of the two, who, in some stories, had a very direct experience of the nature of mind and became realized that way. And then in other narratives, he had 6 teachers who were Mahasiddhas, who he studied with, and he kind of learned all of these practices that later became the 6 yogas of Naropa, which he taught to Naropa. Um, now, he was apparently, according to the histories, a cowherd. So in a way, I think we could say that he was somebody who was relatively carefree in the sense that he wandered looking after his cattle and likely had a tremendous amount of time to just interact with space and phenomenon, which is very conducive to familiarizing ourselves with Mahamudra. Mahamudra, in its most technical sense, is a combination of um, shamatha meditation, so calm abiding, and vipassana, a form of vipassana, which in Tibetan is called laktong, which is an awareness-based meditation. And so the way the practice is kind of classically taught is that one trains in shamatha, and then afterwards one trains in laktong or vipassana, and then one learns how to bridge the two together in a non-artificial way, which leads to this experience of co-emergent wisdom, right? Or the nature of mind, or the nature of all phenomenon being revealed for what it is. My primary, so several of my teachers focused on Mahamudra in teaching me. Tsunma Dechen Zangmo was very quick to introduce me to Mahamudra. And she was actually the first person to teach me these instructions. And then later, I became a student of Bokor Rinpoche, the previous Kyabje Bokor Rinpoche, who was regarded as one of the Mahamudra masters of the Kagyu tradition, the Karma Kagyu tradition. And I participated in this 5-year Mahamudra seminar that he had, and then continued on for a number of years as well. And then also with my present teacher, Gyaltsen Rinpoche, His Eminence Gyaltsen Rinpoche, I've been studying and practicing some of the early Indian instructions on Mahamudra from the Mahasiddha Maitreya. So I'm not claiming to be an expert, but I do have a little bit of experience, and so that's what I'm going to be sharing. So we can't talk about Mahamudra without talking about mind, right? Because the practice of Mahamudra is the practice of learning to rest in the nature of mind. And that means that we need to let go of things, let go of some of our conceptual elaborations. It means that we need to let go of ideas about things, ideas about who we are, ideas about the space around us, ideas about time, and maybe time is not as linear as we make it out to be. Ideas about the Lama, the guru, the teacher. Is the teacher only a human being? Or does our experience also become an expression of the Lama? And so, these questions can seem very philosophical, but when we look at these instructions, they begin to unlock the wisdom of the present moment. So they begin to unlock our ability to experience what's happening right now, both physically, spiritually, mentally, psychologically, emotionally, in the way that we're reacting to things. And the instructions also point out a way of experiencing ease in relationship to all of that, such that it's almost as if we're untying knots, right? All the different ways that we get knotted up, about me being Justin, and all of the ways that I identify as myself. those knots we try and let go of. You know, living in 2020, which is quite a year so far. We want to let go of that, right? We want to let go of our past. We want to let go of our future. And we just want to rest very easily in what's happening now. So, um, Lama Rod came up with the title for this talk, Mahamudra for the People. And I believe next Friday, he and I will be co-teaching the kind of second module to this. And Mahamudra really is for the people. If you read a lot about it, people end up saying, oh, it's one of the penultimate practices that exists in Vajrayana Buddhism. Along the lines in parallel to perhaps Dzogchen, which is kind of the non-conceptual meditation form that exists in the Nyingma tradition. And while it exists, at its height as the essence of Buddhahood, it's something that we can experience in our everyday lives. So even though it's very exalted, it's very simple and very ordinary, right? And so, the Mahamudra for the People piece of this is, the really rooted in the way that practices like this can completely blow open what feels like an ordinary, mundane, regular, normal American life, or wherever we're coming from, a European life, South American life, where it just feels like we're ordinary samsaric beings, and to some extent, that always remains an undercurrent, but Mahamudra blows open the potential for constant realization at all times, in all moments, in our best moments, and then also in our worst moments, our moments of pain, our moments of illness, like with coronavirus. So, what we're going to try and do is, through looking at these 6 nails, we're going to try and buck the system, so to speak. So, I'm going to ask everybody to try and let go of any, ordinary thoughts of you being, this samsaric being. And I want you to try and embrace the not just the potential, but the reality of the fact that deep within, not even deep within you, right under the surface, is the potential for complete liberation in this life. And sometimes that's very hard to recognize. It's very hard to fully understand that that we are not broken, even though sometimes our brokenness can feel so real. And so as we'll see as we go through these instructions, we're going to be able to unlock a lot of our suffering and just let it go. So if you can, just take a moment to close your eyes, and I'm going to recite the first point, or the first instruction. And again, just try and let your body be relaxed. It doesn't really matter what position you're in. I can't see you. So, there's going to be no judgment from me. To my mind, everyone looks great right now. So this first instruction is, don't recall. Let go of what has passed. Don't recall. Let go of what has passed. So the essence of this instruction is to let go of every single thing that brought you to right here. right? Whether it's today, the fact that we woke up, we had whatever series of experiences we did until we got here together online, or it could be the entire historical narrative of your life. I was born in New Mexico, so there's that aspect of my historical narrative. And then my family moved to Massachusetts, and then that became part of my historical narrative. And then we moved to New York, and then I grew up in New York, and then I've traveled in Asia, and that becomes part of the historical narrative, right? The good and the bad, the joy and the suffering. It's all part of our historical narrative. But in this moment, Tilopa asks us to let go of that. In this particular moment, we don't need a narrator to help explain and define how or why it is that we got here. In this particular moment, we just need to cut through that experience, through that habit. Sometimes that can be quite liberating because sometimes our historical narrative is very limiting. Sometimes our historical narrative is very painful. Sometimes we've woven a narrative that's part self created, part projected, and then we believe that. And that creates an aspect of ourselves, but it might be an aspect that's not so real. So don't recall. Let go of what is past. Of course, mentally, that also means let go of the thoughts that just happened. You know, let go of what just happened. Try and be here right now. So the next instruction is don't imagine. Let go of what may come. So this instruction is rooted in not projecting into the future. Here we are together right now. The clock on my computer says it's 2:24. Let's not worry about 2:26. Let's not worry about 3:30 when this session is over. Let's not worry about 5 p.m. or tomorrow. That hasn't happened yet. It's not a reliable source of refuge. And the history that hasn't yet happened is not something we can rely on. So, what would happen if we just let go of any anticipatory feelings, concerns, hopes, even, and just be with what's happening right now? Be with our body, be with our breath, be with our mind. And in some way, just as much as our historical narrative from the past is partially self created, partially projected, not necessarily very real. Our anticipatory relationship to the future is equally as unreal. It's often based on hopes and dreams, but could also be based on curses. So the dread of the future, the dread of a future we may not want to interact with. And there's so much suffering in both of these, relationships, the relationship to the past and the relationship to the future. There's suffering in the way that we relate to the past, and there's suffering in our relationship to what may come, right? What we want to come and what we don't want to come. And yet none of that is real necessarily. So the next instruction is don't think. Let go of what is happening right now. So just as we're trying not to get wrapped up in the past and not trying to get wrapped up in the future, we're trying to remain free of trying to figure out whatever is happening now. That's one thing to take a deep breath and let go of the past. Or take a deep breath and recognize that this future that I'm worried about is not guaranteed. At least in the manifestations that I think it will come. And let go of that. But then what about right now? Take a deep breath and let go of right now. I think this particular time, during this coronavirus pandemic is this instruction is actually maybe even the hardest because it's so easy to get wrapped up in what is happening right now. It's so easy to get wrapped up in our anxieties, our sense of shock. Like I was talking with somebody yesterday, and I told them I just can't believe this is happening. I wouldn't have been able to believe it if somebody in December said, "Look, this is the way March and April and May and June are going to go." I still have a hard time fully grasping the moment. For those who are going through financial problems as a result of this, letting go of what is happening right now can be very challenging, right? For people who find themselves in places of deep suffering, it is hard to let go. And yet at the same time, the beauty of these instructions is that, just try to do it. And you'll see that actually letting go, it's almost as if you can scientifically prove by experimentation that the practice of letting go allows us to break these kind of habitual cycles of creating self-perpetuating suffering in relationship to the past. As if there's a stain from the past that's dictating who I am. Let go of that. And when we feel concerned or hopeless or distraught about the future, let go of that. And then similarly, this moment can be a difficult moment, but it can also be a moment to take the time to rest in your experience of mind. to rest in your experience of your body right now. To begin to wonder how far everything can stretch out as far as your awareness goes. So these are very simple meditation instructions, but when you look, they're challenging. It's not necessarily the easiest. The brevity of these instructions can be daunting. So the next instruction is don't examine and don't try to figure anything out. And so this is really rooted in this kind of desire that arises when we're able to rest to some extent, free from the past, free from the future, free from the present moment. Sometimes there's this intellectual part of our mind or our consciousness that wants to figure out what's going on right now. Okay, well, I let go of the past, I let go of the future, I let go of this moment right now. What's really going on here? Right? So this is this kind of like deeply analytic, conceptual part of our mind that is trying to classify, that is trying to organize, which is trying to, essentially figure out or determine what is happening. So we just want to cut that, want to let it go. And this can be scary. I've taught this, meditation instruction over the past several years, and I've had students who have these very brilliant analytical minds that are, huge kind of assets to them, personally and professionally. And it's interesting because sometimes I'll find these people who have these brilliant analytic minds that serve them so well, in the world of business, in the world of finance, in the world of art, in the world of music, in the world of art. And interestingly enough, I've experienced that some people are scared of letting go, of not figuring anything out, of just letting go of their brilliance. This is one way that we also suffer, is by being too smart, being too brilliant, that we can't just relax into the moment because we're always analyzing, we're always turning the rocks over, looking and looking and looking. What happens if you just rest? And then the next instruction related to that is don't control. Don't try to make anything happen. And again, this is kind of the next kind of phase of this conceptual mind that, in some traditions, they say like the monkey mind, it's trying to make stuff happen. Okay, well, my mind seems to be settling right now, right? So maybe I'm experiencing stability of mind, right? Things feel settled. And then to some extent, because I've cut the distractions of the past and the future and the present, and to some extent, I've been able to let go of this, need to create, or need to figure anything out. Then we start trying to create even more. Oh, well, the ceiling fan is on. And it rained earlier, so I can still hear water trickling outside. And my socks are thick, so my feet feel warm. And we just kind of create distraction. Or we're trying to make a spiritual experience happen. This kind of push to need to have a particular kind of experience. And this is kind of one of these very subtle kind of forms of ego clinging in spiritual practice, where we need to create something other than what's arising in the moment. Right? And the kind of tricky part of Mahamudra is it's so simple, and yet there's an aspect of us that needs to make more out of it than there is actually there, right? And so that's this need to try and make something happen. Oh, now I'm feeling bliss, or oh, now I think I've experienced, one of the boomies, or oh, now I blah blah, blah 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 blah. And sometimes it's the more you read and the more you study, ironically, that the more we start to throw up these ideas of what should be and what shouldn't be. Oh, I'm becoming more compassionate. That's a good thing. Oh, I'm becoming, more generous. Oh, I'm perfecting, patience. You and all of those things are obviously good things, right? But we don't need to chase. The thing about Mahamudra is that we begin to understand that once we cut the past and cut the future, and we completely end all preoccupation with the present, the wisdom just arises immediately. The experience of what is happening right now just arises, right? Just in an amazing way. We don't need to create anything. That's unnecessary. Which leads us directly to the next instruction, which is by far, the shortest. And then again, ironically, at times the hardest. Rest. Relax right now and rest. So, what does that mean? To rest the mind. Right? Again, what does it mean to kind of put down the narratives and just rest? Put down our individual relationship to the past. Put down our anticipatory desires around the future. Rest. Put down a need to define this moment. Just rest. Put down a need to create. Put down a need to figure out what's happening. Just rest. So, what I'd like to propose is, again, if everyone could just, we'll do a little bit of meditation, and I'll ask everyone to get as comfortable as you can, as we've done in the past, and I'll recite these instructions. If you want to, you can, meditate with your eyes closed. I know some people find comfort in that. You can meditate with your eyes open, and under those circumstances, it helps to kind of fix your gaze on nothing in particular, um, and just let your experience of visual consciousness settle. So I can't see if anybody wants to do this, but I'm just going to assume that this is what we're going to do. So take a moment and get your body as comfortable as you can. And take 3 deep breaths. With each breath, rather than focus on bringing something in or eliminating something, just see if with each breath you can become successively more at ease with your body and with the moment. Don't recall. Let go of what has passed. Don't imagine. Let go of what may come. Don't think. Let go of what is happening right now. Don't examine. Don't try to figure anything out. Don't control. Don't try to make anything happen. Rest. Relax right now and rest. Just let yourself go. Again, don't recall. Let go of what has passed. Don't imagine. Let go of what may come. Don't think. Let go of what is happening right now. Don't examine. Don't try to figure anything out. Don't control. Don't try to make anything happen. Rest. Relax right now and rest in the nature of your mind. Okay. So now everybody is enlightened, right? Um, so in about 14 minutes, I'll stop teaching and open up everything to questions and answers. This instruction is so beautiful, and again, when I was taught it, I was taught it, at a relatively early stage in my kind of Buddhist training, and I really connected to it. And then I was also like, um, weirdly obsessed to some extent with, oh well, there's got to be stuff that's more esoteric than this, and so very naturally. I was grateful to receive it and practice it, but then looked for more. Oh, there must be a longer instruction than these 6 points, and there are like very long songs on Mahamudra, by Lama Shang, by there are longer songs by Tilopa, by Naropa, by Marpa, and of course Milarepa. Um, and yet, I think there's something to be said for reaching some kind of spiritual maturity where you're able to kind of come back to these very simple points and recognize that the whole Buddhist path exists within these 6 points. The cultivation of all the paramitas, so the generation of patience, generosity, concentration, wisdom, um, compassion. All of the paramitas arise from recognizing the nature of mind. When we're able to slowly ease into an experience that's free of reference point, which is really what these instructions get to, they get to kind of removing a particular locus, or reference point, which is what the ego clings to. This whole self clings to me, which is why the death process is so difficult and scary for people, because I can't not exist, right? In a certain way, these instructions are kind of like a small death, in the sense that we're just forced to let go, let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of right now, let go of the intellect that is trying to create right now or figure stuff out, let go of the brilliance of my mind, just rest, almost as if we're being cradled by Tara or nurtured by Vajrayogini. These instructions are so profound, and they have applications off the cushion as well. Um, I've taught these instructions uh, within the context of caregiving, so as a chaplain. But I can definitely see how this applies to social workers, or therapists, or nurses, or parents. Right? What does it mean to not control as a caregiver? Often as caregivers, we want a particular outcome, right? We want people to heal. We want there to be a reduction in suffering, right? But in certain contexts, especially hospice, for example, healing is not necessarily the focus. Recovery is not really what you're getting at. Meaningful death, the reduction of suffering as somebody enters into the dying phase, the active dying phase. So not controlling then becomes an incredibly profound instruction. Not examining. Now, how many times have we been sick or experiencing misfortune, and we try and figure out, why is this happening? It's kind of like the beginning of a bargaining process Oh, now I understand why this is happening. It still sucks. I'm in pain, or I'm uncomfortable, or I'm scared. Um, you know, what does excessive examination really do for us other than create more suffering? Same way with don't recall. Sometimes we will look back into the past and trying to sift through memories in order to find, the meaning in the context of this moment. And yes, there can be aspects of our personal narrative that, where the past directly impacts, the present. But what good is it if that's a traumatic past and we kind of end up re-triggering ourselves, right? Re-traumatizing ourselves, rooted in the experience of suffering in the past. All of a sudden, not imagining and letting go of what might happen in the future because of the past becomes a very kind and compassionate, liberating cut. Almost as if there's this, um, you know, obsessive thought train, which is really what samsara is this process of being caught in this obsessive thought train rooted in the fact that I exist separate from you, separate from all of this, and I'm better, I'm smarter, I am more blessed. All these weird things we tell ourselves. And then we also do it in the negative, right? Like, I'm worse than everyone here. I'm worthless. I'm not that smart. I'm not that skilled at pretty much anything. These narratives of brokenness. And last night, in the teaching with uh, Rod and the community, um, somebody brought up this idea of recognizing um, what we bring into space, what we bring into the room, what we bring with us. Right? We bring so much. It's piles and piles and piles of stuff, piles of the past, and we bring piles of expectation. Oh, this is what I'm going to do. You there's a kind of instruction that was given to me by one of my teachers, my first teacher, before she died. And she said, when you're looking for a teacher, you want to find one who is like a child, and it's not because they're um, immature, but sometimes a sign of great realization is this playfulness in relationship to past, present, future, a playfulness around our identity, where we can actually kind of make fun of ourselves, which sometimes is easy to do, and other times we become so serious and so defined by the narrative that we co-create with everybody who's projecting all this stuff onto us. And that's like, that's a lot of weight. That's a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily true. That's a lot of stuff that we don't need to carry. Right. And so in this context, Mahamudra instructions like Tilopa's 6 nails help us to just, cut through the bullshit, to use a term that you find in kind of Tibetan instructions. How bulls, especially like in cartoons, will have like a nose ring, and then there's a rope, and that's how people kind of control the bull. These instructions really involve taking that rope from others and taking control of that rope for ourselves, so that we become the person who's able to liberate ourselves through our practice, rather than us going through, endless cyclic existence, subject to the projections of others, being blown here and there through discursiveness, through fear and anxiety, so that we can take that and just say, no, this is mine, and I'm going to go that way, and screw you guys. So that's how these instructions can be very radical. They're radical in that they cut through all of the stuff that we're told to believe is true, so that we can recognize that that stuff is not true. Mahamudra is kind of this approach to the nature of mind, approach to the nature of the way we relate to phenomenon that's woven throughout the tantric tradition. And so, there are these instructions called the 6 yogas of Naropa, which are very kind of esoteric, and another set of, meditation instructions that are kind of like, depending on the context, viewed as like the pinnacle of tantric practice. And, in that set of instructions is an instruction on illusory body, and the set of meditation instructions really relates to several ways through which we can come to the realization that this whole thing that we've become so wrapped up in is illusory, right? It's not real. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but it means that all of the addictions we have in relationship to this identity, and all of the aversions, all of the activity created by this personal narrative, right? We're able to just let that go, right? And when we begin to look at that and slowly familiarize ourselves with that experience through instructions like this, we open ourselves up to complete freedom. We open ourselves up to, at the most base level of freedom from the way that we propagate our own suffering all the time. From the moment we open our eyes in the morning to the moment we put our heads down on the pillow, whenever we do that, we tend to be wrapped up often in a narrative we never gave consent to. It's projected right onto us. And so these instructions are really about learning how to wipe the slate clean. And so very briefly before I take any questions, I'm just going to recite these one more time. So if you can, just take one moment, and we'll do this. It'll just take a couple of minutes. Take a moment to allow your body to relax. Be in whatever position or posture feels comfortable. So don't recall. Let go of what has passed. Don't imagine. Let go of what may come. Don't think. Let go of what is happening right now. Don't examine. Don't try to figure anything out. Don't control. Don't try to make anything happen. Rest. Relax right now and rest. Be free. Let go. Let your awareness expand. Let yourself dissolve. Let go. So, does anyone have any questions? Again, I can't see you. I don't even know if I can hear you. Um, so, if you want to ask a question, there's the text box on the side, and then there's also the ask a question um, section on the bottom of the page. I don't know if Alex can somehow help facilitate this part, but maybe there are no questions. I'm not seeing any. Oh, here we go. Yay. Okay. Okay, so Brenda asks, when one is a planner, how can one let go of planning or even the control of the planning process? This is a great question. Um, so, this instruction, this series of instructions is really not the kind of thing where necessarily, although, I almost misspoke, necessarily where you get it in the first one or two or three times you do the practice. Really, what we want to try and do is grind down our habits, right? So planning, you're a wonderful planner, Brenda. And when we do this practice, we try and let go of the future. And that can be very uncomfortable at first, or this control of the planning process. On one level, with all tantric practice, when we sit down to practice, it helps if we can maintain boundaries, almost like a sacred circle around us, right, or a mandala. Whereas we sit down to do this practice, we make a commitment to the instructions, right, and the wisdom that's been passed down from Tilopa all the way down through all these great Buddhist teachers to all of my teachers who taught this to me, and then now me teaching it to you, that I'm going to try and engage in the work of letting go. Because your planning abilities will not dissolve. You'll still come out of your meditation experience a great planner. But what might also arise, though, is a lot of the anxiety, right, that comes with planning, because planning is anticipatory, right? And so we try and account for problems that might arise, right? A lot of the suffering in that will become dissipated through practice. So you actually become a lot more effective in the things that you do, because there isn't all of the kind of cognitive dissonance that's constantly playing out. Right. So unfortunately, this is a little bit like going to the gym, where the first time, second time, third time, like you don't look necessarily any different. And believe me, I don't go to the gym. Um, so I'm just kind of projecting. But eventually, you get there, right? Instructions like this can be excruciating in the beginning because there's a part of us that wants to push away at the simplicity, right? But we need to allow these to work on us, right? So just by showing up and doing the practice, showing up and doing the practice, and then trying to take these instructions off the cushion into the planning process. And that helps us to be able to develop more room, a sense of spaciousness, and a sense of equanimity in the things that we do. Hi, Rona. Okay, so the next question is, thank you for these teachings. I wonder if this is an approach to the nature of mind. I wonder if this is an approach to the nature of mind. What do we do if our minds are battlegrounds of depression, anxiety, OCD? I have the most trouble sitting in silence like this as a result. And yeah, so this is a really good point. I when I was training as a chaplain, half of my time training was leading groups on psych floors in hospitals with psychiatric patients with in a whole range, like from very serious mental illness to kind of moderate personality disorder. And the one thing that I discovered in leading a meditation group for a while is how difficult our minds can be, right? For a number of different reasons, but definitely depression, anxiety, and OCD are real things that impact our ability to sit. So my suggestion is to modulate the practice, because I personally don't believe that this is the kind of thing where, even though I just said in to Brenda's question, that we kind of need to grind down our habits. We don't benefit from trying to just like subjugate ourselves through meditation, with the belief that all of a sudden everything that's difficult in our lives will just naturally be resolved, right? So I would take these instructions and see if there's a way to apply them to different aspects of your daily life, right? So that, because again, don't recall, don't imagine, don't think, don't examine, don't control, rest, relax, and rest can be applied to every single action we do, right? So even things like doing the dishes, or mopping the floor, or walking down the sidewalk. What is it like to walk down the sidewalk? Especially, we'll take for example, like pre-coronavirus, where it's busy, right? So lots of people around. How can we walk down the street without engaging in past narrative, right, and future expectation? We're going to get to our destination. It's not as if we say, don't imagine, and we just automatically get lost, right? But it's some of this process of letting go of a lot of the backstory that exists in everything that we do, right? And it's that backstory narrative that actually helps to reinforce at some time, some periods, a sense of depression and a sense of anxiety, right? So I would suggest, Lauren, to try taking these off the cushion and to play with them, as even though these have come down to us as Tulpa's 6 nails, they don't necessarily have to be done within the context of all 6 at one time on a meditation cushion. They can be dissected, they can be played with in a way that allows us to be able to relate to them, that's more honest, because the other side of this is like we're trying to engender an experience of open freshness, right? Natural liberation. right? And sometimes the way we practice Dharma really messes that process up because we think we're supposed to be like, statues. We're supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to be, just like the shiny, Buddhas and lineage lamas that you find in all of these paintings and stuff and statues. And when you really look at it, we're all we all have our problems, and we all have the places where we get stuck, and we all have all of these things alive. And I suspect that the whole lineage lama family uh, was full of people who had all sorts of issues that were really a lot less attractive than um, they were kind of portrayed over time. Their images got shined up. Um, so I would say take these. Actually, there's an instruction by Marpa, Milarepa's teacher, that's to use the Dharma like medicine, right? So to take these and to say, okay, this is my prescription. Now I'm going to try to apply it to all aspects of my life: walking, sitting, running, being in relationship with others, creating, whatever it is that we do, um, because these will unlock the wisdom in everything that we do. Right. So if sitting in silence is troublesome, that's totally fine. We can shift it and practice it in a different way. I hope that's helpful. The next question from Donald Roth. Just when I think I'm getting grounded in the body, um, I'm gonna finish Donald's. Just when I think that I'm getting grounded in the body, I'm being told to abandon that. But I don't want to go back to the crazy. So abandoning settling in the body, abandoning being. So, right, ultimately, the experience of mind, right? So allowing everything to be grounded in the body is a useful technique to settle, right? To experience a sense of settledness and, of course, groundedness, right? Now that's only part of the practice. The other part then is to let go of that, right? And so that ends up being kind of rooted. So just as we experience stability as we sit in meditation and we're able to feel ourselves on the cushion, we're able to feel our breath, and maybe we're able to feel our heartbeat. All of the things that we feel. There's a ceiling fan in here, so there's like this light wind on my skin. Right? Just as we settle into all of that, we then very kindly and gently try to expand our awareness from the body outward. Right? And so when we do that, at first that can be very uncomfortable because we can become very attached to this sense of settledness. And being settled is good. I'm not saying it's not a good thing. Um, but the awareness aspect of Mahamudra is really this kind of recognition that the nature of mind is beyond time, is beyond space, it's beyond the confines of whatever room you might be in right now. And even if you were outside, the nature of mind is beyond the confines of space, right? That awakened mind has no limitation, right? So again, these practices are, they're not dangerous, right? But they can get uncomfortable, and the art of practicing them at times is learning how to modulate, right? When it feels like I'm just like spinning off into some kind of formless thing that just doesn't, seem productive at all. than to kind of titrate, right? To kind of bring everything back and to go slowly, step by step. So, even though this instruction is being introduced publicly, typically, the way these instructions are practiced is they're practiced with a teacher being able to kind of help guide the way a little bit, right? When one has a relatively close relationship with a teacher, the teacher, and it's not that they need to know everything about you, but it helps when they know a little bit about you, right? Because sometimes we might be the kind of person who wants like skips 7 steps, you know, or we might be somebody who's obsessed with every little step, right? And maybe those students, need to be pushed a little bit. The same way the ones who are just like, I'm gonna just, bypass this whole thing, need to be reined back in. So having a teacher guide us through these meditations is helpful, as is having a spiritual friend. So hence the importance of having a sangha that can be supportive. Kimberly's question. Lama, as soon as someone recovering from intergenerational trauma of erasure, colonization / assimilation, I struggle with practices of letting go. I feel protective of a sense of my identity. When we carry this into our relationships and interaction in oppressive systems, where is the balance of taking responsibility and accountability rather than allowing the status quo? This is a great question. So, when in these instructions, relax right now and rest, and let go, right? When I was saying before about let go of our personal narrative, the key here is to, it's not like an erasure, right? It's not like, oh, Kimberly, all of your past doesn't matter, right? And, or, all of the future that is, that you will experience does not matter as well, right? What we're letting go of is the suffering in all of this, right? And the suffering, and it's not to say that because it's complicated, because our own suffering can be beneficial at times, right? It can lead us to the points of growth, right? We can get pushed through, by our suffering to places of strength, right, and resilience. So the letting go part, right, has more to do with the suffering created by attachment, right, than just kind of erasing our past or erasing the possibility of any kind of future that we want. And in the case of intergenerational trauma, the future is important. Manifesting who we are is important, right? That's part of the way that we begin to make sense of a lot of the trauma from the past and to heal from that. And so what these instructions are not about is any kind of self-abnegation. Like, yes, they're about confronting ego and clinging, but it's not rooted in saying, your past isn't worth anything, but it is, this instruction is very helpful in letting go of the way that we tell these stories that hurt us, where our telling, our addiction to our brokenness, right, propagates suffering, right? So the aspects of our personal narrative that are, these positive threads that keep us going and they connect us to the past, especially to ancestors, right, and to past lineage masters, is important. That's almost like an artistic expression of the power, intergenerational power that is able to go from point A in the past into the future without being, mutilated by colonization, right? Without being, this aspect of power that just kind of, is a thread that keeps us connected to the past and allows us to be generative in the future. These instructions, again, are rooted in cutting the attachment, and that is a scary thing. Like cutting attachment doesn't mean that things just disappear, but cutting attachment really ends up freeing us from this myopic kind of coming back to, but I'm this, I need this, I, went through this, I, I. So that's what it's rooted in. It's not a deletion. It's not a negation of. It's a lifting up by removal of the way that we can be neurotic, to use kind of a Trungpa-like term, in relationship to our story. So hopefully that's a little helpful. It's a lovely question, and I mean, there could be a book or two or three or four written on this. So forgive me if it's not that, my answer isn't that good. So the next question, Lama, you have some experience practicing Zen communities. Can you speak to how Mahamudra differed from or aligns with Zazen or just sitting? And I can't see. Oh, here we go. Oh, it's from Jinlei. So in a way, Mahamudra and some aspects of, thank you, Kimberly, that Mahamudra is not necessarily that dissimilar to aspects of the Zen tradition, especially Zazen. They're both non-conceptual forms of meditation, right? And they're both focused on now, right? They're not focused on, like with deity practices, this, elaborate generation, right, into the form of a deity, and then mantra recitation and visualization and all of that, right? This is about just experiencing fresh, right? So, in a sense, my personal feeling is that it kind of depends on the kind of Mahamudra instruction and the kind of Zen instruction. I think what we find, from the way Mahamudra was taught in medieval India by Maitrepa, and then later by Gempopa, a couple generations later in Tibet, is that there was room for sudden enlightenment. And then over time, for a wide variety of reasons, this kind of debate arose in Tibet about, sudden enlightenment versus gradual enlightenment. And for some reason, everybody began to kind of align with this kind of like, older classical Indian Buddhist narrative that says that, realization is this slow and progressive, thing that happens. That's the way awakening dawns. But in Mahamudra and in Zazen, there is this possibility of sudden realization, these sudden glimpses of what it's like to be free from the way that we are attached to the past and the present and the future, and attached to our present, seeming brilliance, attached to our ego, right? So I think that I personally don't feel like there's necessarily a huge amount of difference. And again, in Zazen tradition, even though they emphasize just sitting, the experience of that original wakefulness, right, or that kind of playful, beginner's mind, a mind that's free. Again, the reason why they use kind of the symbology of the child is that sometimes children can act spontaneously because they haven't been taught how to be, right? So in both Zazen and in Mahamudra, the practices can easily be taken off the cushion and taken into daily life practices of being whoever we are. So in your case, a wandering yogi. In my case, a householder, and everything in between. So the next question is, so glad to see you well, Lama Justin. Thank you. This is so wonderful and healing. I just wanted to clarify the let go part of the present instruction. So for the other 5, anchoring, observing the breath helps. That feels a bit confusing with uh, the let go of the present instruction. Not sure that even makes sense. Thank you. Thank you, Anjana. So, you know, again, like in Donald's question, um, kind of allowing ourselves to just settle in the body is rooted in the generation of an experience of stability, right? And then the reason why the process or the experience of stability is important is that as we slowly kind of almost as if we're peeling away the layers of an onion, right? We're peeling away the past, we're peeling away the future, we're peeling away the present, we're peeling away, different aspects of the discursive mind that's trying to make more out of this experience than is actually there. We That process becomes increasingly subtle, right? So and there are other Mahamudra instructions that will then ask us to kind of expand outwards once we've achieved some stability in our practice, to expand our awareness outwards, free of past, free of future, free of the present, free of any discursiveness, free of a need to do anything. And as we rest into that experience, the stability is important because that's the thing that prevents us from being distracted, and just kind of going off with the next thought. So uh, the these practices, so technically, Tilopa's 6 nails is in some cases taught after there's some kind of sign of stability with shamatha meditation, right? Because without the anchoring, sometimes we'll just automatically get caught up in the thought train that happens during meditation, and we become distracted from being able to engage in any of these 6 points. So I don't know if that makes sense. So it's kind of ironic that we need to kind of stabilize ourselves and kind of get a little earthy before we can get spacey. I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. But the more I'd suggest the more you kind of begin to play around with the practice, and just see how it arises, and then I would also look at the confusion. You know, um, Not that your confusion is anything unique, because I think we all go through it from time to time. The process of letting go is counter to our habitual kind of frame of actions that we've been doing for most of our lives, and so that's why it can be a little tricky. So Lorraine writes, thank you, Lama Justin, for this practice. Could you please say something about the Vipassana-like part of this practice in your experience? Thank you. So yes, so so the Vipassana aspect of Mahamudra is this practice called Laktong. And in this practice, if you were to do it just on its own, right, what you're essentially doing is resting the mind, right? So allowing the mind to experience some kind of stability. And then from there, trying to almost as if you're stretching like out dough, right? Just letting your awareness expand outward, so that necessitates a relationship to awareness of space, right? Like actual space in the room around us. Perhaps awareness of height, right? In all of these different dimensions. Awareness of sound, awareness of time. How do we experience time? And the Vipassana aspect is also similar to kind of the classical Vipassana that you find in the insight traditions, where one can occasionally drop a little question, um, and these 6 nails can be modified. Um, when I let go of the past, what's there? When I let go of the future, what happens? And in this way. So when I let go of what's happening right now, where is my mind? When I don't try to figure anything out, what arises? So the Vipassana part is, this kind of expansive knowledge gaining, right? Or certainty experiencing part of the practice. So hopefully that's helpful. I want to be mindful of the time. It's 3:33. So there are 2 questions left, and if it's okay, I'll answer those, and then we can, and then we'll end here. So is that okay, people? Hopefully. So. Okay, yay, thank you, Edith. Thank you, DL. Caroline's question is, I struggle with the not controlling aspect of this practice. I find that when I let go, I either fall back into thinking or I feel like I'm numbing out / disassociating. I have tiny moments that feel like I'm deeply resting, and then of course want to cling to that / control my experience. Is this just a naturally titrating experience in and out of rest, and then those moments naturally get longer, or is wanting them longer my ego? This is the practice. Has this practice evolved for you over time? So I'll take the last part first. Yes, this practice has totally evolved over time. I will think back to, I guess I was in my early 20s when I was, given these instructions, and I found aspects of this excruciating. And yet at the same time, I find your question is actually full of all sorts of good signs. So it's very natural in the beginning to kind of feel like, we experience dullness. And that begins to kind of almost burn away the more that we kind of make a practice like this regular. We don't need to worry about, I have to do it every day, otherwise I'm going to fail. But it's a little bit like rowing a boat. Like when you row a boat, like a canoe or something, or a kayak, right? Like if you stop rowing, like you'll go. There's kind of the the kind of natural force of direction from all the effort you've put in that allows you to coast for a while. But then, while you're still training, when you stop rowing, eventually you stop, right? And so this naturally titrating experience of in and out is that it does get longer, right? In the beginning, our mind is very reactive, right? And it really is kind of like um, almost like an enemy sometimes. Like, there's an aspect of ourselves that wants to push back. It wants us to be distracted. It does not want us to go deeper, right? But the thing about this practice is that it's not a practice in which we're subjugating ourselves. It's a way in which we're actually kind of like caressing our experience of the moment so that we can kind of let go and be at ease and experience everything more deeply. And then at a certain point, these instructions become so um, pleasurable that to just engage them is to experience peace, is to experience a long a feeling of deep connection, to experience. So in the beginning, it's a little jerky, but it does, with practice, this becomes so incredibly deep, and beautiful. Um, so I would encourage you to if you can, or if you feel interested, to make some commitment to kind of exploring this, even if it's once a week at first, or this blended practice of doing some on the cushion and then some as you go about your daily life. And from I think what I know about you, you are a caregiver, and so some of these instructions can be taken off the cushion, and you can really kind of play around with how they relate to an experience of authenticity as a caregiver. And then, so this will be the last question. And this is by Indrani. Thank you, Lama. Justin's teaching seems particularly relevant to me during COVID-19 times. Could you talk about how our reactions to things can be understood in the context of these 6 instructions? I ask because I'm struggling just to rest during these times, even though I have the luxury of doing it more easily than many others. Yes. So resting in these times, and relaxing into the moment, is very hard right now. I mean, that I will totally agree with you, Johnny. And yet, the more we begin to kind of have the ability to have a playful relationship to experience, sometimes we can begin to look at why that's the case, right? And as we do that, we begin to kind of glean, some elements of wisdom around how we become reactive, and why we react to things, and how hard these instructions can be. So I think on one level, um, there is so much going on in these times, right? There's COVID, and then there's this kind of like botched, like approach to COVID, and there's all the protesters, who are putting people's lives at risk, and then there's the economic impact of this, and then I think it's safe to say that if we haven't necessarily gotten sick ourselves from COVID, we know people who have. We know people who are experiencing loss. We may know people who are dying, or who have died, and this is just all very overwhelming. Um, so again, these instructions are rooted in coming back to very gently unknotting all of the ways that we are holding on to everything, the way we hold on to the past, the way we hold on to the future. But this particular point of what's happening right now, right? The way that we're holding on, where we're kind of like, it's so easy, and I'm speaking from personal experience, like it's so easy to become preoccupied with everything that's going on right now, to the point where it's I will feel very unsettled. I'll feel unsettled, frustrated, angry at like all of the crazy injustice that seems to be happening. While there are so many people who are so vulnerable to illness, and these instructions are a gentle pointing out of what it would be like if we were to let go of the past, and what it would be like if we let go of any projected thing of in relationship to the future, and what it would be like to let go of um, uh, the need to figure any of this out, right? So the most important part of relating to the difficulty of this time is to gently see if we can create a container for our practice so that we can successively let go. And again, kind of like the onion or peeling a fruit, like to gently just see where we get attached, and where we hold on. Right? And to see if we can, my first teacher, Tsubme Dechen Zangmo, and I mentioned this in modern tantric Buddhism. She used to say, after she taught me this, she was like, I don't want you to read anything about this because that's just going to mess up your mind. It's going to make you too too intellectually preoccupied with Mahamudra, when really what you should be more focused on is just sitting and doing and feeling the practice work on you, right? And and I was like, okay, but I love to read. And she's like, well, if you love to read, try to read and then forget right after you read. So as you're reading something, read, process, forget it. Read, process, forget, right? And it's not because the tradition is anti-intellectual or doesn't care about knowledge. It does, but that instruction is rooted in just how obsessive we can be uh, around wanting things to be a particular way, or wanting things to be particularly clear. And sometimes they're not. And the best we can do is to begin to settle our mind around these 6 points and just experience what happens, right? And just like dust settling, if we're able to kind of put this practice into practice and have faith in the fact that it leads us to the destination, then we allow ourselves the possibility for the dust to settle, right? So sometimes it's easy, and then sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we need to put a little bit of effort and almost like spice into the way we practice, and other times we need to consciously kind of slow things down and be gentle. So, my feeling is that if you were to just really try and spend time with these instructions, practice them, get to know them, and then really, again, like in I think it was Caroline's question, like this idea of, or actually, I think it was, or maybe Lorraine's, about using the Dharma like medicine, right? So to be able to take these and slowly play with them, slowly unpack them, but you'll get there. I know that you'll get there too, and it's not resting like Sleeping Beauty, completely oblivious to everything that's happening, right? But it's resting the same way you might see a bird in a tree, just at ease, but alert, aware of what's happening. So it's not necessarily an experience of dullness or an experience of lack of relationship to everything. It's a sense of just being here right now, even when right now can be insane. And somehow, when we're able to allow ourselves to kind of unpack the experience of right now in this way, using these instructions, the right now actually becomes tolerable. But it means that we need to, the ability for it to become tolerable um, directly correlates to our ability to be gentle and easy with the present moment. So hopefully that's helpful. So I want to thank you all. We did run over time a little bit. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, and I'm incredibly grateful that you all showed up. And I wish you the best moving forward and in your practice. And I'll see you soon. Okay. Thank you so much.